And at work, I keep it loaded.
Today,
It's better than concealed carry, it's open carry.
today we're in Daniel, the 4th chapter. If you recall, I said that in the first 6 chapters of Daniel, there are several lessons. One of the most substantial lessons that we find beginning in chapter 1 is that God is perfectly capable of making it possible for any believer to succeed in a land that it is not their home. Protected, defended, and prospered. And as we look at the story of Daniel and his compatriots, we find a story where they have been of a people that were originally taken out of bondage, given the opportunity to possess a land, to make it their own, essentially to own their own home. And then left under the law to keep it by the act of their own will in service to God. In a kind of a contract where God said, you do these things and I will prosper you in these ways, knowing that they could not necessarily do it. So they made an attempt to hold on to a place based on human effort and did not succeed. And eventually, for a time, lost it all. And now, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Belteshazzar, Daniel, now find what it is to live with the help of God in occupied territory. And they have succeeded absolutely miraculously, not through their own effort, but because there were certain things that were absolutely settled in their lives. And those things included a commitment to those things that God said that was good, and an absolute sense that if God's word said it, that it was true, and there was no room for negotiation in their lives. A young king, having succeeded a ruthless Babylonian king, has been in a place where he's had a front row seat to at least 2 absolutely miraculous events. One, having had a dream that troubled him greatly, insisted that those who were of the intelligentsia in the kingdom, the old guard, tell him not only what the interpretation of the dream was, but tell him what the dream was. Struck panic in everybody's hearts because the charlatans, the conjurers, the learned men had no capability of doing such a thing. They couldn't read a man's mind, his thoughts and his dreams. But a young Hebrew of approximately 19 years old speaks up, tells the king clearly and bluntly, I have no power to do this thing, but the God that I serve, he's able. And God speaks to him after he and his compatriots fall on their face before God, and they seek him, knowing that the lives of everyone that were in the counselor's court depended, to include their life, depended on the outcome of that response to prayer. And God does it. It is beyond miraculous. The king, for the first time in his young life as a ruler, has seen men that actually have the ability, seemingly, to do what he has not been able to see with all the charlatans in the kingdom. But he makes an error. He falls down on his face and he worships the man, Daniel, who serves the Most High God. He misses it. He doesn't get the point that it is the God of Daniel that has done this, not Daniel. Another event occurs. The king, having heard the plan of God, not accepting the fact that if God says it, it's settled, it's done. Nothing can change it. To include the love of God toward those who have made him king of their lives and accepted salvation by grace. The king sets about to try to alter the revealed word of God to him, and is going to honor the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego by making Judaism an approved religion in Babylon, but insisting that they worship his gods as well. Sees it only as religion. He alters the statue that he set up that's 90 feet high, 9 feet wide. Has it entirely made of or overlaid, we don't know, with gold, so that his kingdom will last forever, regardless of the revealed plan of God, for the centuries, past our day today. Sentences these young men, because they will not worship, to death in a fiery furnace. God saves them in an unheard of fashion. They walk out of the fire at the king's command, not in rebellion, but just as a statement of truth that they have been rescued by a God who is able to alter the physics that cause fire to bring destruction. And as they step out, their hair is not singed, there is no singeing on their clothes, and they don't even smell like smoke. And the king declares to everyone that nothing should be said against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, not his God. He misses the point. These young men are to be used for a utilitarian purpose, and that worship would be conducted on the king's terms. You know, friends, no relationship that anyone tries to establish with God for their purposes on their terms will ever prosper. When we come to God, we have to come on his terms. And we have to accept his purposes for our life. And we have to decide that we are the creation and he is the creator, and that we were created for his worship. We were created to make his heart glad. We were created to bring him glory. We wonder why so many people in the earth today are so dissatisfied with everything. Nebuchadnezzar is the fourth chapter, between the third and the fourth chapter, something has happened. He sees the entire world prior to the event as being a vehicle to meet his political and personal ambitions. But something changes. Two things that you've heard me say before if you've been here any length of time at all. You can't kill a dead man. Paul said that he had died with Christ, that we all died with Christ. What can the world do to you if they take your life? To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. It's to be free of pain, heartache. It's to make every bad thing that's ever happened to you come untrue. The second thing, you can't steal from someone who doesn't own anything. So we know that God is able to keep believers in a world, a Babylon, that does not reverence God. We know that He is able to provide us with a way of looking at that world through the surrender of our lives to His will and for His glory, to remove the fear of death, and for the surrender of all the material things in our lives to Him. Recognize Him that He returns those to us as stewards. You know, I heard it put this way one time. If a neighbor comes up after you hear a large crash down the street, and he says, wow, some guy was driving drunk and absolutely plowed into a car, destroyed it. Say, wow, that's unfortunate. If he comes up and he says, some guy driving drunk plowed into your car and destroyed it, the response is usually a little different. If you don't own any cars, and they all belong to God, if you don't own any homes, if you didn't choose where you are, if there's nothing you have that belongs to you, it's all in stewardship, it means your heart's not set on it. You can't be robbed if you don't have anything. Nebuchadnezzar finally finds this out. Nebuchadnezzar the king, to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth. Listen to this. This is the first hint that something has changed in this man. Peace be multiplied to you. The focus of this man's heart is no longer for what benefits him, what he wants, the desires of his heart, for the maintenance of a kingdom, to shape the world in the manner that he wishes it to be shaped. His heart now is to speak to the entire world and say, my heart now, I wish you peace, not war, not to be my servants, but the earnest desire of my heart is peace for you. It's changed. I thought it good to declare the signs and the wonders that the Most High God has worked for me. He does not mention Daniel. He does not mention Shadrach, Meshach, or Abednego. He is now talking as a man with a changed heart about a God that he knows. There is no middleman. How great are the signs and how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. He's really started to get it. He understands that God is absolutely sovereign. He knows what it is to be a king. He knows what it is to have the absolute power of life and death over everyone in the kingdom. He knows what it is to to own everything, and everybody only has control over what they have by his good pleasure. He knows what that is. And now, instead of declaring his authority, he turns and he says, I understand that the one who owns everything is God. I understand that he's the king, and he decides when the rain falls and when the sun shines. I understand that he's the one that makes decision about life in this kingdom, and his kingdom is endless from generation to generation, and it's everywhere. And I'm a servant. How many people would be so much better off if they came to the place where they accepted the lordship of Jesus? If he speaks it, it's true. If he says it, it's what's good for me. And my life is to carry out those things that are dear to his heart. Now he begins to tell his own personal history. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house, flourishing in my palace, and I saw a dream which made me afraid. And the thoughts of my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. If I could expand on that a little, I was the ruler of the entire universe, and I knew it. I had everything I could possibly desire. You know, some people have terrible, terrible lack of peace. And they fall into the thinking that essentially says, if only I had that car, if I only had that job, if I only had that house, if I only had these circumstances with my family, if I only had, and then when they get them, there is no peace. Nebuchadnezzar, having everything, has no peace. Therefore, I issued a decree to bring all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. Then the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers came in, and I told them the dream, but they could not make known to me its interpretation. But at last Daniel came before me. His name is Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God. In him is the spirit of the holy God. And I told the dream before him, saying, before we go further, he makes it known that he renamed Daniel according to the gods that he had worshipped in the past. The God who had never in his life been able to reveal anything that brought him an ounce of peace. So many people worship so many things. Job, family, political things, you name it. They worship it. And it brings no peace. Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know the spirit of the holy God is in you, and no secret troubles you. Explain to me the visions of my dream that I have seen in it and its interpretation. These were the visions of my head while I was on my bed. I was looking, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew and became strong. Its height reached to the heavens, and it could be seen to the ends of all the earth. Its leaves were lovely and fruit abundant, and in it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it. The birds of the heavens dwelt in its branches, and all flesh was fed from it. I saw in the visions of my head while on my bed, and there was a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven. A watcher is commonly used to describe a heavenly being. There was one that looked down, often angels. And he cried aloud and he said thus, chop down the tree and cut off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the beast get out from under it, and the birds from its branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump and roots in the earth, bound with the band of iron and bronze. In the tender grass of the field, let it be wet with dew of heaven, and let him. Now, I want you to notice something. Several times he has said, it. Here, it changes to strike the heart of Nebuchadnezzar. And he says, and let him. It makes clear that the tree that's spoken of is Nebuchadnezzar, king of all the known world. That the order of things established through generations of the kingship falling to his family are now being interrupted in such a way that things seem to be taken away from him. Let his heart, and it talks about the tree being hewn down, its stature being destroyed, and then metallized band being placed around the stump of the tree and leaving its roots. An agricultural practice that was used when the intention was to cut away a tree that was not useful and to allow from the stump a new tree to grow. We've seen it. We do things like that today in orchards. Let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let him graze with the beasts on the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed from that of a man. Let him be given the heart of a beast. And let 7 times pass over him, 7 seasons. This destruction is by the decree of the watchers, and the sentence by the word of the holy ones, in order that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men, gives it to whomever he will, and sets over it the lowest of men. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now you, Belteshazzar, declare its interpretation, since all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known to me the interpretation, but you are able, for the Spirit of the Holy God is in you. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was astonished for a time, and his thoughts troubled him. So the king spoke and said, Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its interpretation trouble you. In other words, I'm feeling like there's no hope. Don't let it trouble you too. Belteshazzar answered and said, my lord, may the dream concern those who hate you, and its interpretation concern your enemies. He's about to tell him that he is going to be, for all appearances outwardly, destroyed as the king. And then he tells him in a manner that's very common to God. God knows the end of everything. And at the end of everything, this is going to be a problem for your enemies, not you. The tree that you saw, which grew and became strong, whose height reached to the heavens, and which could be seen by all the earth, whose leaves were lovely and fruit abundant, in which was food for all under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and whose branches the birds of heaven had their home. It is you, O King, who have grown and become strong. For your greatness has grown and reaches to the heavens, and your dominion to the end of the earth. And inasmuch as the king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven and saying, chop down the tree and destroy it, but leave its stump and its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze, in the tender grass of the field, let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let him graze with the beasts of the field, till 7 times pass over him. This is the interpretation, O King, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my Lord the King. How would you like it if you had everything you thought you wanted? If you had all the homes you wanted, you had all the cars you wanted, you had all the money you wanted, you were in a place of esteem of everybody round about you, you had made every possible stride and got every recognition for the work that you do, and you now own the company, you have everything, and you have no peace. And God sends his own emissary to you, and he speaks to you and says, I'm taking your house, I'm taking your car, I'm taking your job, I'm taking every recognition that you've achieved, and not only that, I'm going to put you in a spot that you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. But before I do it, I've sent my servant to tell you that ultimately this is going to be for your benefit. That's what's happened to Nebuchadnezzar. Now, the reason we've made this a testimony day, just like the songwriter said, some through the fire, some through the flood, some through great trial, but all by the blood. Some of us were bright enough to come easy. Some of us were stubborn enough that we became tough. But the fact of the matter is, Nebuchadnezzar is about to make some statements about his experience. And one of the things you have to catch, in no statement does he despise his time of trouble, nor is he ashamed of the path that he had to come through, because ultimately it brought him to a right relationship with God. This is the interpretation, O King, and this is the degree of the Most High, which has come upon my Lord the King. They shall drive you from men. Your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make you eat grass like an oxen. They shall wet you with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and he gives it to whomever he chooses. If you think anything in your life has happened to you by accident, if you think you're in this building today by accident, if you think the difficulties that you face are the product of some uncontrollable series of circumstances, friend, you're making the mistake Nebuchadnezzar did twice. The fact of the matter is, he says he knew us from our mother's womb. He says that we were predestined. He said that he chose us before the foundation of the earth. He knew everything that was going to happen to you. He knew every sickness. He knew every economic problem. He knew every single thing that would tear at us and pull us one way and the other. Everything. And now God is going to do what is necessary to do to bring the king to the place where he meets God's on God's ground, where he has relationship with God after God's will, where the king who has had everything actually begins to live a life that's worth living. And as much as they gave the command to leave the stump and the roots of the tree, your kingdom shall be assured you after you come to know that heaven rules. Therefore, O king, let my advice be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by righteousness, by being righteous, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. Perhaps there may be a lengthening of your prosperity. You know, people go to Egypt to see the pyramids. There's something you can't see today. That's the blood and the lives of those who died to put up those abominable monuments. God's heart and his word to Nebuchadnezzar was, for all the great and mighty things you did, turn around and do justly to the poor that you exploited to make these mighty things your monuments. You know what? If you've ever been in management, you know that there is ample opportunity to use and abuse people. You know that in the name of business, in the name of the good of the company, sometimes it's easier to do away with people than to suffer the inconvenience of their situation at the time of their need. And you know what it is if you're a believer and in management. To say what 3 Hebrew children said to the king, we're not slow to answer you, O king. We know what the right thing to do is, and we choose to do it. And if you fire me, God knew it before the foundation of the earth. If I lose everything that God's given to my hand, can't steal from a man who doesn't own anything.